Light 'em if you got 'em. Time to torch down the house, y'all. You're listening to the Shannabis Cast. Like us on Facebook at Shannabis TV. Follow us on Instagram at Shannabis Cannabis. Watch us on YouTube, Shannabis Cannabis, or listen to us on Podbean. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to us on the Shannabis Cast. I am here with Andrew Lopas, also known as Razor. He's basically 40 years of experience plus in the genetics culture of cannabis from the Triangle of California. He is most notably recognized for the PR for his very unfortunate fire that he bravely fought and risked his health, and I'm glad to see that he's still here with us and his family. But that's how you would know him, as he gained popularity on that unfortunate tragedy. And I'm so happy that he could be here with me to share everything about himself and get information out there to the people that need it so we can arm you in the mean streets of cannabis. Welcome, Andrew. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I hate to start off with a cough, with everything that's going on. I'm okay though.
Oh, it's okay. So Andrew, tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, it was a farm that I'd worked 2 years putting together, working with the state and the local officials to get permitting when the permitting was really hazy still. So it was a lot of work. I came out of my own pocket to pay for a lot of I had to get hydrogeology, I had to get cultural reports, I had to do a water review board assessment. There was a whole lot of stuff that went into getting those permits, and then a lot of stuff that went into like building a farm along the lines of the approved plans. So I was in compliance, and the farm had been a legacy market farm in the past, but I had to redesign everything. It wasn't about growing in the tree line, it was about growing an actual farm crop. So I did all that due diligence, did all the application work on my own, and then me and my wife pretty much together, I called on workers that had worked for me in the past on other farms, and brought them in as employees. And we had it was basically the night before, we had 20 people showing up to begin our harvest on October the 8th. And it was really dry, the wind was blowing, and I'll never forget that evening we watched sunset from the ridge on our property that looked out over Santa Rosa and the Russian River Valley. And we shared a joint, and my wife teared up. She was like, it's been so hard, and it's just like this last couple of weeks, this dry wind has just made it even harder. We had to triple our watering just to keep the plants healthy for harvest. And I was like, yeah, we made it though. This is it. Tomorrow morning we get up at 5 a.m. and we start our first harvest, that's permitted, legal, everything. And we went home, went back to the house, went to bed, and I got up because I had an indoor nursery, and I got up to do a little work in the nursery, and all the electricity went off, and then it came back on after like about 2 minutes, which was weird and odd, and the wind was blowing really hard outside, and I felt like a tree might have hit a power line. And I woke my wife up, and I said, I got a bad feeling about this. And we went outside, and it was just like real windy and dry, like a Santa Ana condition. And pretty much about 15 minutes later, we could smell smoke on the wind. Within a half hour, there was on our ridge line was like 100-foot wall of flames being blown sideways.
Andrew, The last I read in a headline, press release, media release was that you were the first farm to get your coverage for your $1 million policy from an insurance company. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, that was kind of the reporter got out ahead of the facts on that because we were, it looked like we were going to get compensated because Watts, a big attorney came in, a very well-known attorney that handles these litigation, and so it seemed to everyone like a slam dunk, like we were going to be the first cannabis farm to get compensated for loss in a disaster for cannabis. If anyone's followed that, they know PG&E like did a lot of legal maneuvering to not have to pay anybody anything. They haven't paid anybody for any of the fires that they're responsible for, which is multiple fires, billions of dollars. It was nice that the reporter was like there and talking to everyone and got this idea that I would be this unique cannabis farm that would be the first cannabis farm to get compensated in a lawsuit against a major utility. But yeah, that didn't work out. It hasn't worked out. By the time the money gets to me, it'll probably be like a Chuck E. Cheese coupon or something, I guess.
You have been approached the last couple of years, especially since that piece ran, because it solidified you as, being a grower in the industry, growing cannabis, being part of that, because I find that it's very easy for people to manufacture themselves into, the knowledge base and the social media aspect of things, but there's no really verifying people. It's hard to really verify, especially in this industry, when a lot of people have come out of a market that didn't use their real name, and a handshake deal was better than a contract. So you've dealt with some C-suite executives, you've worked in some organizations. Can you tell me about some of the things that you found and the experiences that you've had?
Well, okay, I was also a member of the CGA, the California Growers Association, and the Sonoma County Growers Alliance. So I think through them, there was, they were doing a lot of work with like NCIA, and I got approached, my name got thrown out there, and I got approached by a lot of people in the months after the fire, who were gonna like save me, and told me what good work they thought I had done and everything, and had come up with different ideas on how I could, recover my farm with their help. And it was a lot of it was, sadly, it was just like really a lot of it was positioning people, trying to see if they could, acquire like my corporate structure and me in a way where like I would work for them then, and then they could absorb the brand I had worked on and creating and everything. And then some of it was just, uh, it was, I could just tell they were kind of not understanding what cannabis really was, and how, they had come from marketing or, some background like that, or like, like venture capitalism, like takeover type stuff. And so they were like really absorbing things, running them, because they felt like they were, these C-suite wizards that were going to just take the cannabis industry by storm. And everything that was laid before me was like, I can tell you, like, I had already like avoided, sitting down and signing contracts with people from Canada, because I just felt like that offer of being able to trade on the market was not something I was into, because I wanted cannabis to become legal nationwide in my country. I didn't want to divert my efforts into working with people from another country that were in their own struggle over legalization, and then end up being owned. It felt like that's what the offer really was. Like I would end up being owned by people from another country just so I could have, an abbreviated name on a stock market, which I felt like was useless to me. It's not what I mean. It just didn't seem real, and so I avoided it. And I know a couple other people that went in for that, and we all know now that a lot of these Canadian investment deals were bad, not good for the industry at all, because they weren't good for the Canadian side or the American side. They were just like a waste of funds. Like, where's all that money? I don't know. It's crazy, you know.
Let's go into the seed aspect of things. There's this big sales pitch out there, especially in the hemp world, in the cannabis world, in the THC world. There's other levels of problems, but also, in the hemp world, because there's this mass distribution of seeds, and everybody can tell you they have whatever they want, and they're selling things between each other, through social media. And this guaranteeing of plant structure, and this guaranteeing of a feed definitely being feminized, and creating the potency that the federal government is mandating. How much of that is reality and fact versus an inflated sales tactic?
Genetics is something. So I was born, so my relationship with cannabis goes back to when I was a baby. My grandmother made a tincture that she rubbed on my gums when I was teething, from cannabis that she grew in her backyard. So having genetics that are, and genetics that can do what you need them to do, to grow plants, has been something. I was like born into a family that did that. And my family was involved in the early skunk genetics in California that became really kind of legendary. And there was, back then, there was an enforcement around genetics, like who you would share them with and like how they would get around. But occasionally someone would get a bag of weed with seed in it, and they would pop that seed, and then they would have a plant from a famous genetic line, and they would start growing that plant and feeling really good. And maybe that plant would go to seed, and they would have seeds. And that was kind of how the whole genetic thing was back in the 70s and 80s. And then what happened was, because of prohibition, I feel people really got into trying to get a name brand type tag to a genetic so it would sell on the street better. And we all know these names, Trainwreck, or Skunk, is a big one. Like any cookies, any of this stuff, I mean, how much of the actual cannabis sold under that name is that actual genetic? Anyone who's been in the business long enough knows that it's like probably like not even 20% of it. And that's just, when people are pushing that they have this special genetic or they have the magic beans. I mean, it's like Jack and the Beanstalk type nursery rhyme shit. It's like, don't buy the magic beans. It That's what I try to tell people. Like, research genetics. There's people who have done it really well, but you're gonna have to do what I did. You're gonna have to go into a place where cannabis is, from, where you can land race a genetic from, where there's a ancient tradition of growing it. I mean, cannabis does a lot of what it does because, like many plants in the plant world, they need to attract pollinators. So we are the pollinators that cannabis attracted, so it could like thrive and develop. It's much older than we are. It's been around longer than us. So it kind of saw us as, mammal hominids on the plains in the Cretaceous period, and it made an odor that were drawn to, and then we carried the seeds around. And so, that's how I look at it. I look at it as the plant is kind of really running us. And when these people say that they've created this strain, which is like a mycology term that refers to fungus and, uh, a whole different thing. It doesn't have anything to do with cultivating plants. And I'm just like, this is ridiculous, because they're selling ideas of things that sound really good because High Times has promoted these ideas for 4 decades, and people buy it because when you repeat something enough, I guess it makes you feel comfort in the idea of it, but it's all bullshit. Like I like 90% of the people hawking seeds don't know what the fuck they're doing. They don't know where the seeds came from. There is no genetic from North America that originates in North America that is a valid genetic. All the genetics are from the Asian area, the Himalayan steppes, and Central Africa, and have been traded and traveled around the world for like, you know, probably more than 50,000 years, have been carried by humans to different places. And the stuff that we like covet so much came to the Americas with the colonizers, with the Spaniards, with the Portuguese, with the British and the Dutch brought those seeds because they carried them on their ships, because wherever they would make port, they would have to make more rope and more sails. And they would immediately plant a bunch of these plants so they could make rope and sails that they had damaged while they were at sea on long voyages. And that's how Colombian, weed got so potent, was because it was brought over from India through Portugal into South America. And so, when you look at the history like that, you need to know that you're tracing a genetic lineage that goes back to India, or goes back to Afghanistan, or goes back to Nepal or Tibet, or, Thailand for the lower strains. There is no sativa, there is no indica. It's bullshit. There was a French guy that wrote a book on cannabis in the late 1800s that named 8 different subspecies of Latin names. And indica and sativa were 2 of those 8. So it's like, there's 6 more flavors that haven't been on the menu for the last 50 years because hippies could only remember 2 subspecies. And so they made a binary distinction between narrow leaf and broadleaf. And they're like, narrow leaf makes me stay up at night and broadleaf puts me to sleep. And it's all bullshit. Like, I can grow a broadleaf plant that you'll call an indica that will make you not sleep all night and keep you up. And I can grow a narrow leaf plant that you'll call a sativa that will put you out in a minute after smoking it. The whole thing is just a bogus claim, and all these genetic claims that they'll do these things is sadly what's in the way of this industry really like getting a fair start and people being able to really share the experiences around this plant. Because a lot of it, sadly, I feel we're being kind of led around by emperors with no clothes, like Jack Herrera was saying. But within our own industry, people that use cannabis who have made themselves emperors with no clothes, that mislead people with all this stuff that they just kind of like heard when they were young teenage stoners, and they're older people now and they still spew this garbage. And it really is in the way of this industry getting a good foothold. I'm glad that some scientists are actually starting to get involved, but like, I've seen a lot of scientists get misled. I'm hearing voices from the science world where they've done the research and they're like, hey, this stuff's not right. The stuff that you guys promote is, if it bud tenders in every dispensary are told to spew this garbage that High Times kept going for 50 years to sell magazines, and it's not real science. It's just kind of like the power of suggestion, telling people they're having an experience with cannabis that's in the way of their actual genuine experience. And that's why it upsets me.
Speaking of High Times, and
Yeah.
you mentioned skunk.
I guess I just made my feelings.
So, you're a genetic specialist. That's what I title you gentlemen and ladies. I have yet to meet a lady.
I was taught the skunk plants that I learned to grow, that I watered. I started helping out when I was 9 years old, carrying buckets of water and, helping to make the compost teas and feeding the earthworm bins with the scraps off the table and all that stuff. It was women that were growing all the cannabis back then. The original skunk strains were like developed by women growers. The first guide to growing sinsemilla written in English was written by two women, by Goldie Rush and Mountain Girl, Jerry Garcia's ex-wife. And they wrote that, and it was a mimeograph thing that got handed around like all over Northern California. Like every hippie that was trying to grow weed had it, because it was the only guide that existed. This was way before High Times or anything like that. It was the only guide that existed that told you how to sex a plant from a seedling, and explained like why male plants had to be destroyed and were bad, and female plants were what we wanted, and that female plants had to be they had to be kept from being seeded, and that was really the start of the industry, was back then. I think it was a byproduct of prohibition, where the actual dovetailing of cannabis sales with narcotics, because of the drug schedule, made it violent and made it a really tough game that edged women out, because in the 80s it got really violent and really tough. Cannabis deals were made side by side with cocaine deals and heroin deals, and it became a little male dominated since then. And I think that was really unfortunate, because it's a prohibition thing that we need to be done with, that it's so male dominated in the industry.
I believe women were able to move around, especially in the 70s and 80s, and even going back to the 60s, because women were to be seen and not heard. So there was
they were the best
half
smugglers.
The country of men that never thought for a second a woman would be so intelligent to be running an entire, cannabis grow operation.
Now, I mean, one of my neighbors was Subcool. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's pretty famous doing genetics for a long time, and he's recently passed away. May he rest in peace. And his wife is really she has all these genetics that she created, Jilly Bean and stuff like that. They're amazing genetics, and it's just it's I know that she's been struggling with like a lot of people that aren't honoring the fact that he's passed on. She is the person that controls these genetics now, and and that's why I hate a lot of these people that are recently in the industry trying to take over the genetics thing and all. I almost got sucked into that weird Phylos thing. I almost sent them a lot of genetics, but then it just felt funny. What the things that they sent me back felt funny, and I never put the package together, never sent it. I mean, I've been giving genetics to people who like are sick and need genetics. Like, I've never sold genetics. It's like, I was raised that, if someone is not feeling well, if they're like going through chemo, or like back in the 80s, if they had HIV, or, if they've, got a problem sleeping, or anxiety, or like back pain, or anything like that, you hook them up. You like, 9 times out of 10, if someone's sick, you don't give them seeds. You need to make a seedling. You need to make a plant for them that they can take care of, that they can kind of nurture, that'll help them. And then you help them harvest the plant so they have medicine. Then the other part of it was so I could like, have a lifestyle where I lived off grid and avoided, trouble with the cops. I needed to sell some weed to make some money so I could like have that lifestyle. So, to patients and people that were suffering, I gave stuff freely to make money so I could kind of, have fake IDs and drive different vehicles so I wouldn't get caught. I sold weed to people that, sold it on the black market, or whatever, the legacy market, whatever you want to call it.
Whatever that means.
So,
the market to get it to people that needed it.
Exactly. And some people would come to me as a customer, like off the street. And then I would realize like, oh, this person's struggling to buy this from me, but they want it so bad because it's doing something for them. Then I would have a conversation with that person and figure out a way that, I could just like hook them up. I was always more willing to teach someone how to grow their own than I was to sell them a bag if they needed it as medicine. You know, if it was
Well,
like
it goes back to the whole saying, if you give a person a fish, they'll eat for a day. If you teach them the fish, they'll eat for a lifetime. So you can't,
exactly, yeah,
especially in this culture, you can't maintain somebody's constant medication and constant need to consume cannabis, you know, especially in an illegal market or an underground market, you know, as much as, because you and I, we're poster children, we're the culture, right? So you and I both, you know, spent pretty much our whole lives in this subculture of, you know, drug dealing, you know, whatever anybody considers naughty, naughty, naughty or bad for you is what, you know, people like us were, you know, labeled, have been.
yeah.
And with cannabis being legal now, I feel like some of the culture is celebrated in the rock starism of cannabis, while the actual, you know, street people, the actual people that were there, that were part of the chain of life, you know, have been a little, their personas celebrated, but that they
Hmm.
themselves are scolded.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I've had it happen. It's been, you know, I had to kind of go into the job market the last couple of years, and you know, kind of eat humble pie and be like, I can't just resurrect this corporate structure I've created. And you know, I interviewed with MedMen. Oh my God, let me tell you, you know, that was an
Please tell us,
experience.
tell us.
I had to go to this hotel in Palm Springs, and like they're all wearing matching red shirts, right? And you know, and I had to kind of put my career with cannabis into a resume form, which was weird and stuff. I, yeah, it was like the oddest. And then they called me back for a second interview with, you know, one of the guys. And I worked with a construction company in Oakland, California, and that was my job, was project managing. Like, we built a lot of the grows for Amsterdam. So I met that guy, Adam. Is that his name, Adam? Or I can't
Yeah.
remember exactly the guy's name, but you know, and he was, when he was first like pitching that thing at this Amsterdam event, and you know, he was like this tech guy that was going to create the greatest cannabis company ever, you know, and it was just, and I mean, he kind of in a way, I guess, did on paper, but like all of these companies that ran it up the flagpole so quickly, what the piece that I feel that they missed is like, you know, for the last 100 years, like when a guy or a gal like me or you brings a sack of weed to someone, there's been some kind of prior setup to that, and it's a dance, and it's a relationship, and you sell that first bag, and it, you know, they give you the money and they get the bag and they're happy and you're happy, and then you do the second deal, and then it's like they're a regular person that gets this medicine, this magical thing from you, and it's a relationship. And it's like none of these dispensaries, none of these companies understand that relationship. If they haven't like had to break down a pound into ounces and like spread that out among 16 people, then they don't know what that relationship to that pound becoming those ounces, becoming something that people possess and that they roll joints out of. They don't, or make bong hits, or however they like to ingest it. They, there's a relationship there. There's a synergy, and none of these dispensaries or these corporate entities understand that, and they can't decipher it. So that's the thing that's lacking from all these corporate models that I see. They got the names, they got the flash, you know, it's glossy, it's this or that. You know, they got the latest hip hop star or rock and roll star, you know, on the front of their local sesh material that they're putting out. You know, they know all the right people. You can get Tommy Chong to come do a bong rip with you and put it on Instagram, and it's like, but you're still full of shit because you never really understood that primary thing that's made this really what it is in our community, is that there's this, like you said, it's a subculture that's existed that subculture didn't exist, there would have been no access. And that access was created through relationships that are way more, they're not so easily defined as a corporate advertising exec or a tech exec would like define them through an app or an ad. You just can't do it that way. You can't create packaging with all this fancy stuff like Lowell did, or like Canadescent does, that's like, oh wow, this has its own set of matches and a real fancy feel to it. But it's like, it's soulless. It's just an object. It's just like like what the situationist artists would call
the
like
corporatism of
an empty
cannabis.
vessel.
The corporatism of cannabis, it's going to get
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
I want to take us back though. We're talking about access. I want to take us back to 1988 and the great debate of Hightimes Cup in Amsterdam, 1988, and the genetic strain skunk. Please tell us
that
more
was my
about
skunk.
this.
Yeah. Well, so every year to celebrate harvest, we were being pretty successful with our harvest. And I'll just a little history on me. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, but I was brought to California at the age of 1. So every summer as a kid, I would get shipped back to Brooklyn for a month, usually August, which is like the most fucked up month to be in New York City. And it kind of always felt like a punishment until I was, I think, 12 years old, and I brought a bag of weed with me. And if you had a bag of weed from California, New York City, back in the 70s, in August, I mean, they didn't see green weed in August in New York City back then. Everything was like seeds and sticks and oregano. So like when I pulled that bag out, I was a hit immediately. And I was like, this is pretty awesome. And it became a yearly thing where I was like, I'm going to take some weed to New York City with me. And, I took an ounce the first time, a quarter pound the next time, a pound the next time. Pretty soon I was taking, 10 pounds to 50 pounds to 100 pounds. And so by 1988, I was growing my own. And with the blessing of my uncles and my aunts, they let me grow skunk. And I grew a lot of skunk, and I did it pretty good. And I also had my own Kush genetic. So I had skunk and Kush. And I hit New York City with that, my usual shipment, a couple of 100 pounds, sold it all off. One of the guys, this guy named Isaac that worked for Steve Hager at High Times, had told me that Steve saw the skunk and was like, we want to take pictures of this and put it in the magazine. And, I'm like, yeah, whatever, like, don't put my name by it. And I didn't think nothing of it. So we did all our business. We bought our tickets to Amsterdam. We went to Amsterdam like we usually did. So 1988 was the year. There was always this cup that was really surrounded hashish, because that's what Amsterdam was into. But High Times came and took it over in 1988. And the way they did that was, there was a growers cup aspect of it where it was supposed to be locally grown Amsterdam growers that grew this stuff. And all of a sudden there's these guys that have this immaculate looking bud entered in the thing, and they have it all out in this glass case, right? So, the greenhouse growers in Amsterdam are growing like their greenhouse weed that they make hash out of. It doesn't look that pretty. And all of a sudden there's this skunk bud, that's like 16 inches long, like this giant cola. Nobody's ever grown a bud like that in Amsterdam at that time yet, and everyone's just like, what the hell is this? And I look at it and I'm like, that's my fucking weed. That's my skunk right there. And I found out, in fact, years later, Hager told me at an event in Portland where Soma was there, he was like, yeah, that was the weed. I got that weed from Isaac. And I'm like, I sold that weed to Isaac. So basically, the first winner of the first Cannabis Cup that High Times sponsored in Amsterdam was my weed, but it had been smuggled there from New York City after I smuggled it to New York City from Northern California. And, it was a complete fraud. And pretty much I feel like that was how they started the Cannabis Cup, and the Cannabis Cup was a fraud from that point on to me. I never entered it. I never took it seriously. I kind of felt it was a sad joke, and it just became people that would go to it. I never went to Hightimes Cannabis Cup. I've never been to one. I've been to the Emerald Cup. I like those guys, Tim Blake and those guys. It's a decent event, but
I hear good
the
things. The Emerald Cup was the next. I've never really gone to the cups, like never. I've gone to a few conventions, but not the cups. But the Emerald Cup I wanted to go to, and then like all this happened.
To the first 3 Burning Mans, and then they kicked me out. So it's kind of, the Emerald Cup was the same way for me. I went to the first 3. No, I just, they were tired of hearing Razor criticize people. I think they're just like, God, he's got to talk shit about everybody. I mean, I'm not into the idea of the cup, of growers like competing for the symbol of, like, come on. It's,
Not
they
until we
should have
figure
made,
out which strain helps, attacks, and kills cancer. Then we can start
exactly,
having cups.
right? Yeah, like, it's a self-gratulation a little too early. That's how I've always felt about it.
Every episode I pull some current news blogs and things like that. This interview, because I knew we were going to be chatting for a while, I only pulled one, and I thought it was very fitting for our conversation. And it goes back to the fact that they're one of the original, hemp companies out there, and they didn't see this coming. Like it's like this kind of thing didn't happen to them before. It's all these years spent saying you're gonna do this, gonna shoulda woulda, and while the money's gone, right? Hemp Inc. announces that it will proceed with its lawsuit against American Hemp Seed Genetics LLC. Announced today that the company is now able to proceed in a lawsuit against American Hemp Seed Genetics LLC in the Court of Appeals of North Carolina. American Hemp Seed Genetics is managed by Jerry Norton of Salem, Oregon. AHSG entered into a contractual agreement with Hemp Inc.'s wholly owned subsidiary, Industrial Hemp Manufacturing LLC, on April 26, 2018. So they went into this agreement back in 2018, right? On October 12, 2018, Hemp Inc.'s wholly owned subsidiary, Industrial Hemp Manufacturing, filed a lawsuit against American Hemp Seed Genetic for breach of contract, breach of express warranty, breach of implied warranty of fitness for a particular purpose, breach of misrepresentation, incidental and consequential damages, unfair and deceptive trade practices, and fraud. The CEO of Hemp Inc. is suing this organization. According to Hemp Inc. executives, Jerry Norton of AHSG convinced IHM executives that the seeds IHM were to purchase had excellent genetics and were the right seeds for planting in North Carolina's soil and climate. Thus, IHM agreed to purchase said seeds in order to plant 1,000 acres of hemp for biomass. Norton recommended 1 pound of seeds per 10 acres of land with 100% germination. Norton assured IHM his seeds had a 97% germination rate, and to make up for the expected 3% failure rate, he added 3 more pounds of seed for a total of 103 pounds of seed. Seeds were sent to him, IHM, in North Carolina per contract. Upon receiving seeds, IHM did a test for germination and found that seeds had a germination rate in the high teens, much lower than the 97% germination rate that Jerry Norton had assured IHM of. Co-funded by the results, IHM sent the seeds out for a professional germination testing by experts who were able to get a 27% germination rate, higher than IHM's first test, but still disturbingly lower than what Norton had promised. Now, that was a mouthful. Let's get back to how the plant actually works. Ken, you guarantee a bag of 1,000 seeds to be planted outdoors on land as feminized seed.
Not 100%. Can never It's never 100%. The process of feminizing seeds is real simple. You have to take a female plant and you have to cut its ethylene production. And in the panic that ensues when the ethylene is cut, the female plant will produce a pollen sac. It'll bloom a pollen flower. That flower has pollen in it that will impregnate another female plant or fertilize it and create it to gestate seeds. Those seeds will be on the order of like 99, 98% feminine if you did it right. If you did it right, and if the luck is with you, you'll get like a 98 to 99% feminized rate. I've seen COAs that claim 100% feminized rate, and I'm pretty sure if you slip a lab tech, a couple of C notes, that they'll put anything on a PDF for you. But I just know from experience, there's always going to be an expression of a male plant. It's a survival thing the plant will do. There will be an expression of a male plant. The idea is there is no male chromosome, so there shouldn't be. But the thing is the plant's innate desire to procreate and survive. There will be some representation of a male plant in there somewhere. And that's if you did it so carefully. You would have to do it you got to be really good at it. And you have to have some experience with it. And I got to tell you, I worked with some hemp guys last year. They were making COAs for seeds and doing all types of stuff. And it was shady. And all the guys that they were talking to, it was shady. And these guys are creating billions of seeds and putting them on the market and selling them to farmers all over the U.S. with COAs. And,
and then they're farming out those seeds, which are garbage, and it's going to pollinate the entire.
Yeah. No, it's the hemp thing is, if it would have been, the hemp thing is an example of why you just don't want cannabis to be completely no oversight, unregulated. There's got to be some regulations in there to just to make it right, to keep it nice.
If you were doing a number between 1 and 100, how many hemp farms out there do you believe are growing crops that are below 0.3% THC?
Well, this is how I learned it was done. And I'll just tell you, and I did it this way. I grew 600 acres last year for 2 different entities in Ventura County. And we passed our, we got our, our USDA pass, and the COAs were created for this, all the material that came out of the 600 acres. I mean, it's the most cannabis I've ever grown in 1 year. I grew more cannabis last year by growing hemp than I did in all the previous 42 years combined. And it was amazing experience for me to see 600 acres of cannabis plants while the sun set on them. It was beautiful while they were flowering. But what you do to get that pass is this is the loophole. The loophole is it's a 3-part test. It's 3 parts of the plant. It's an 18-inch from the top, an 18-inch lateral branch, and then an 18-inch sample from the ground. And they all get ground up and tested together. So that test has to yield a less than 0.3% of THC 30 days before harvest. And that's the loophole. The loophole is if you time it just right and have the guys from the government come out and take those cuts, grind them all up, and third-party test them. And if you do it, and that's what I did, I had a little Orange Photonics field tester, and I just kept testing my levels. I knew about when THC begins to spike in the plant development. We called them out, and we had them tested, and then we waved goodbye after they left, and that's what we used for the COA. and that's what the USDA allows you to use for your COA.
I'm going to go lawyer on this one right now. And also, what you and I both represent, advocating against, people being put in prison over this plant. How many people, small business owners, store owners out there selling bags of CBD hemp that did not get harvested for another 30 days, maybe even longer. And therefore, they're going to get tested on the streets by the police, and it's going to spike THC levels.
I got a little bit here, and I took it to, well, I tested some of it that we cured in the Orange Photonic little field lab that I got, and it's about 3 to 4% THC. So it's cannabis at this point.
Just another reason why we need to legalize it across the board, and we need to stop with this, because there's a lot of people that are out there that don't know what they're doing, don't know the realities of things. And
the crazy thing about it is, I told them at the beginning of the season, I said, you know what, I feel like, you guys pulled this off on a small scale last year. Now you want to go big. I think, I talked to a lot of people. Cannabis guys I know are switching to hemp this year. I think there's going to be a glut on the market. And they're like, no, we've got people in place that are going to buy this and blah, blah, blah. January 1st, I went to go get my monthly check stipend, and the guy didn't have it. And, he's like, the money, we haven't sold anything. And he had 30 reefer trailers on his property that I had worked the prior month with the farm laborers and filled each one of these trailers with totes. And so it was all sitting there still on the property January 1st. And he's like, I have no money. I haven't sold this. Now, mind you, this guy has a palatial, his own huge lake on his own property in Ventura County. His name is on a brick at the Reagan Library. He's a big deal up there or whatever. But all of a sudden he's broke because he's got to pay for all these reefer trailers to hold the CBD hemp that's not selling on January 1st. And I'm like, I told you that it would probably take you to March to sell this stuff. And you should really have my money, because I've done my, I've grown this stuff, processed it, packaged it. It's ready for market. And, now you're backing out on this whole thing. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to walk away, and basically I'm going to kiss $100,000 goodbye. So you lose my number, because I never want to, this is not what you said you were doing this for in the beginning. You were going to be doing all this research and helping people and creating this tincture and working with CAPNA to do this stuff. And it just all turned out to be bullshit. He wanted to sell smokable flower because he felt like there was a big killing to be made on the smokable hemp flower market, selling to these.
It's only because they're taking something that looks like weed, and this is the hustle. It's a bunch of kids that are purchasing the hemp weed and selling it on the streets as real weed.
Yeah.
Because the hemp weed, it looks good, it smells good, and to the 20 somethings or the teens,
these guys,
they just think it's
these
weed.
guys were. I mean, I met the guys that they were in bed with. They were going to sell through a compendium of folks that basically control all these smoke shops across America that are in strip malls. And they were going to package it pre-rolls and eighths and sell it over the counter in these smoke shops. And they were hoping truck stops and places like that. But, the kibosh got put on it. And the market got a glut, and and they didn't do it right. And
nobody wants to smoke shitty weed. That's why you went on your.
It was a bloodbath.
That's why we have genetics. Nobody wants to smoke shitty weed. Yeah. That's why we have genetics. I would like to touch upon one more thing. I would like to end this with some advice that you could give to the hardworking farmers out there that own their property, that they're trying to put some food on the table for their families. These C-suite guys walk in, these sales pitch guys walk in with their CBD, CBG, blah, blah, blah. Going forward, when some cats are out there talking about, oh yeah, I got this high CBG, da, da, da. I mean, all cannabis has CBG, CBN, CBC, THC. How likely
the flavor of the month, cannabinoid.
How likely is it that that genetics cannabinoid profile is going to yield under 0.3% THC with a potent enough CBG to extract out to create just a isolated CBG plant product?
I mean, so we're both on LinkedIn. We see a lot of it advertised there. But I do see some people that I know who are like really trying to, there are these benefits that CBG extractions have shown in treatments that I don't know, have any personal information about. But I mean, you got to do your due diligence. When you're chasing cannabinoids, you got to really know what you're doing. The reality is, at the end of the day, it's like, the flavor of the month. People are pushing these ideas around this stuff because they don't make money off the actual thing. They make money off the hype that they deliver over it. And then they walk away while good farmers are left. I mean, it was horrible what happened last year. I heard of suicides. I heard of people like losing their farms, losing their homes behind this. Like good farmers that, just were told that this was a way out of a hole they were in. And it might have been, had it not been a lot of these people pushing these bags of seeds and hyping this whole thing into what it was. And like, now look at them, even some of these schmucks got caught in this game of musical chairs with nowhere to sit, who thought that they had all the angles figured out. And, I feel bad for the farmers that, want to continue farming. I mean, my best advice for farmers today, right now, is we need a lot of like really good locally sourced veggies in this world and microgreens, and, grow some cannabis on the side, but like grow some shit that we really need that can really help people live through the next year. And you should be able to survive, because that's what's going to be in demand. Cannabis is, there's a dearth of mids in the market right now at best. And there's like a real lack of premium cannabis. I think most people who like started smoking cannabis in the last 20 years don't even know what like a really good wholesome cannabis smoke is. Using the PK bud hardening technique became popular thanks to Hightimes and the Cannabis Cup that they throw. That's just horrible weed. There's so much phosphorus in that weed. There's so much unnecessary like metal agents in that stuff to make it like hard and sexy looking or whatever. I mean, that stuff's horrible. I can't smoke that stuff. And it's sad to me that there's a lot of people out there that think that that's good smoke, and they're promoting that as like a medicine that'll make people feel better. And I just see a lot of people that don't know what they're talking about and are, engaging in an unhealthy practice thinking they're doing a healthy thing.
I'm sick of these hemp guys talking about they're selling Bubba Kush. No. Stop calling that, especially when you're trying to tell me it's under 0.3% THC. No, I'm a 1998 Bubba Kush girl. Like, that's some of the best I seen. And here's the thing though, I don't know if it's the 98 Bubba Kush that that I know from my access chain, and that's what we don't have. We don't have this library. We don't have this really factual, genetic database, and where we can begin, not just, Leafly has, mapped out what they can, but none of that's verified by test results yet. I think Leafly, because of all the data they already have, they could easily start implementing something like that. But then we go back to black market folks and folks from the streets, we didn't keep track of that stuff necessarily. There's not a lot of, evidence there, I guess you can say.
Yeah, not when you had to be able to carry everything you owned in a backpack and jump out the window at any given moment. It was hard to keep a record of everything. And you didn't nobody wrote anything down, so.
I came from a place where scales got your ass thrown in jail, so I can still INH like nobody's business.
Yeah, me too. I'm proud of that. My first scale was the little scale that you clipped onto the baggie and you held it and it had the little, that was my first scale.
I no, I use my eyes. But back then though, but here's the thing, it was always over, going back to what you were saying about there was a camaraderie with people, you weren't, most people hate the term drug dealer. And even though on the advocacy play, cannabis is not a drug, in my opinion, because where we are in 2020 and moving forward into the pharmacopoeia and getting cannabis into the controlled environment of healthcare, which with all we've discussed, it absolutely needs to go, because people need to make sure they're getting what it is they really need. And I feel with hydroxychloroquine, our cannabis cleanse, I'm going to say it for the first time, the coronavirus legalized cannabis. That's really what happened, because now when it comes to fast tracking clinical studies and things like that, and opening up smaller nonprofits and groups and organizations to be able to apply for grants and case study plant-based alternative treatments, especially when people that are undergoing things like chemo and radiation treatment are going to be even more exposed to a deadly virus than if they choose a treatment that's more of a holistic plant-based regimen.
I live way out in the desert right now, and I work, I'm working as a consultant on these new greenhouses that they built out in the middle of the desert hot springs. And I get to go to work every day because I'm considered an essential, worker doing an essential job, which is for me, almost this surreal experience where everything's in a kaleidoscope sometimes, where I'm just like, what kind of, absolutely right. It's forced people into this place where it's hyper advanced, the medical study, in a way that just wasn't happening before. A lot of weird people making these weird claims about CBD tincture is gonna kill the coronavirus and stuff, which I think is really weird and bizarre.
It's just another showmanship of the people out there that are just trying to capitalize on a label, on a name, on a fad, on a hype.
Tell me this, because you're on LinkedIn too. What's up with all these dudes that all last year were hawking CBD and were the hemp brokers of the world and blah, 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 on their yacht, I could get hemp to you anywhere, anytime. And now they're all selling masks and sanitizer. And it's just weird to me because their tagline is still, hemp king or whatever. But they're out there on LinkedIn, I got a shipping container full of N95 masks, and I'm just whoa, man. It's just I don't know. It's a little bottom feeder.
Those brokers flip to the N90, because here's the thing: the federal government, no, you can't. No, there was none of that. So the second that happened, I knew they were a scammer. I just deleted and blocked a lot of those people, because that just showed me. And there's actually a lot of profiles on LinkedIn that is actually Bob in Bangladesh posing as an attorney, a cannabis attorney in Michigan or Florida, talking, literally on these profiles for years. Yeah, it's a catfish, but it's a business catfish that's occurring on LinkedIn.
People have been going after me, trying to sell me LED lights and stuff for the last, I don't know, 8 years on there. And I'm just I never hate a hustle, It's you got to hustle, you got to make it. more power to you, but I hate being hustled. So I'm like, definitely, I've never really done any business on LinkedIn. You know, it's just kind of a thing. I say hi to people, and
I appreciate the hustle too. I'll actually respond back. I'm not in need of your services. Thank you. I'll even, give a little thing.
yeah, I'll be polite.
Keep them
I'll be
on because
polite.
I respect everybody trying to make some money. When you start sending me a message to my LinkedIn and then following up with an email and then sending me a text message, then you're spamming me and I have a problem.
Yeah.
But
Then it's like,
those hustlers and those people, those connectors, they're a connection, they're a follower. So as much as we might not be a customer, they could turn into a customer in whatever fashion, or just build your following, your database on social media, which the internet and making money doesn't necessarily intersect a lot of the time. And I think that's
yeah,
a big fraud from the internet industry and all of the tech world. The tech world, with everything I've seen in cannabis, and I reference the cannabis industry. I've never correlated it with the alcohol industry. I actually, gotten in this with some people.
yeah, me neither.
I never.
No, it's ridiculous.
It wasn't the same.
It's ridiculous.
And
Yeah.
I always, equated it to the tech industry. It's the tech industry, and I can't even imagine, because at what point is the collecting of data where it's just you're collecting the data, but it's not doing anything? Who cares? You have the cold call,
Yeah.
and nobody answers on the other line. How valuable is that list? It's not. Thank you so much for doing this and this interview. I hope that it, if anything, people that listen to this and can take away some key points that they can ask these brokers and salespeople and advisors and experts and geniuses everywhere that are trying to sell them their goods and services, that they at least can ask the right questions and know if they're hiring somebody with real field experience. With you.
Thanks for having me.
Is there anything you would like to leave the audience with?
I mean, just, really, like, if you want to be a part of this, do your due diligence. If you're already a part of it and you have history with it, you keep doing what you're doing. I know a lot of people like want to be a part of this exciting show down the road that they see and all the big lights and stuff. But man, as somebody who has been there and is now looking for another farm in the most remote area I can find again, it's really, you got to take all this stuff with a grain of salt. Like, this industry is not completed. The people that claim to be the lions of it are not, they're just not all that, and nobody's got a handle on this. So I just feel like the people that are going to be in this for the long haul, that really care about the community and the subculture and the new people coming in, I think it's important that the new people coming in, they get to have their new experience. They're going to be the future of any industry that comes out of this. The young people that are motivated to do this and to be involved in cannabis, and that's the thing that excites me about it, that I'm interested in watching, is the people that do really have some values and some ethics that are going to take this into the next thing that it's going to be. That I don't know what it's going to look like, but hopefully it never goes back to what it was like, during the 80s and 90s and aughts. I mean, I just want it to keep evolving and be something that's substantial, that, I mean, it supports a community of people in this world, and it just needs to continue to do that. And once people understand that, and that it's not about like being the kingpin or the big fish on Wall Street with this, that it's about being a part of a community and knowing you're part in the community, and just giving back before you receive, then I think this is going to benefit more people, and it'll grow, and legalization will become a reality at some point because of that. It won't be because of like some fancy guy who's driving a big car and owning a big house. It'll be because of the tightness of the community and how that community relates to each other.
Thank you for listening to the Shannabis cast. Good night.